You may once in a while read my columns that I put in there, and in my most recent one, I was reflecting on the ways in which the 6 basic values of Unitarian Universalism, justice, equality, interrelationship, pluralism, transformation, generosity, all these things, all these ideas, all these values have parallels in other religions, major religions, minor religions, and also moral guidelines. I'm thinking about Buddhism, the Christian Gospels, Islam, to name just a few. And also secular programs or semi-secular programs like the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous programs and other covenants that are like that, whether they're religious or secular. And I was elaborating a little bit on the Eightfold Path. It's always hard to remember all 8 parts of it, but they are, listen to the first word that's in each of them: right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, remember Toad, and right mindfulness, and right concentration. Toad was doing a lot of that too. And these 8 parts are actually usually divided into 3 sections, and those sections are wisdom, morality, ethics, and concentration. The word right appears a lot in these steps, implying that it's not just about spirituality, it's about intention that is involved in being on such a path. And some of this intention is done individually, and some is done with others, maybe like Frog and Toad were doing. And today I want to elaborate a little bit on this intentionality. I'm going to do so by means of a story from my own life. And it goes like this. A number of years ago, when I was a university professor, it's a true story, I also was very much engaged with the Union of Faculty Members. And there were more than 600 members at the time I was doing it, so it's a large group to unionize. And one year, I was elected president of the union, and it was at a time when we were doing a new round of collective bargaining, a very tense period, very much an us versus them kind of situation. But I jumped into the task enthusiastically, determined to achieve a good contract. The negotiations started to really heat up at the beginning of the school year, when we were already teaching without a contract. And there were a lot of meetings, demonstrations, talks of a strike. And my stress levels rose astronomically. And I began to think that, once these negotiations are over and we have a contract, I'm going to start taking better care of my own well-being. I'm going to start meditating. And so I did. I had a colleague who was a Zen monk and who faithfully organized weekly meditations and ceremonies in the Soto Zen tradition. And I thought, one day I'm going to do that. He held 2 chunks of meditation in each of these periods. They were 25 minutes each. And he said that we should sit preferably in the so-called lotus position. I thought of it more like a pretzel. And these 2 periods were separated by 5 minutes of walking meditation, so our legs could work again. My reaction to this whole experience was twofold. 1, I kept thinking, I'm glad the negotiations are over. And 2, I am now in physical pain. I did not experience these evenings of practice as spiritual practice, or anything useful for that matter. But I stuck with it, and I got better at the mechanics of it. I also loved the Buddhist teachings that were part of these evenings, like learning about the Eightfold Path for the first time. After a while, a suggestion was made, probably by the guy who was organizing our meetings. The suggestion was for all of us to go on a week-long retreat in the mountains north of Montreal. It's that mountainous region where they do a lot of skiing, but there are also retreats and camps, and we went to one of those. When I arrived, I was my typical self, hurrying along, talking a lot. I jogged to my cabin that I was assigned to, and I was talking rather loudly and incessantly. And as I was doing so, I passed a guy. He was dressed in a monk's robe, and he gave me the stink eye. Oops, I thought. Obviously, I'm doing something wrong already. So I started walking more slowly, especially when he was around, and toning down my voice. And that sort of thing, that realization also happened when I thought it was okay to chat in the 10 minutes before entering the actual meditation room. And also when I was helping out in the kitchen and talking with the others there. Every time I was corrected by a glare, a verbal admonishment, or simply realized myself finally that I was not doing the same thing that the others did who had been there many times. I mentally thought, oops, every time, and I started changing my behavior. I started to be more attentive, more intentional about what I did. Towards the end of the week, something was changing in me, a transformation in my thought patterns. I looked forward to the meditation. I actually was observing my mind as instructed, and I even began to feel that I was connecting with something deep in myself, and also with that mysterious something outside. I started hearing subtle sounds from birds and rustling leaves outside, sounds I would not have noticed in the early part of the week. I munched my food more slowly, more attentively, more aware. I began to apply what I was learning about what is called Shoshin. Shoshin is a Sino-Japanese word that means beginner's mind. A mind that's open to new knowledge, knowledge without applying our judgmental filters, of which I have a lot still. I also began to apply what is called Zanshin, which is a term that means remaining mind. Zanshin is a state of conscious awareness. It's a state of mind where we are being intentional, getting things done in the right way. It's a mindfulness where we focus on the process rather than on the end result of what we do. Very much the opposite of what I was doing as a union president. It was just the end result that counted. And how we got there, well, we tried all kinds of tricks, but I wasn't specifically seeing them as good practice. They were just, strategies. When I practice meditation nowadays with Zanshin, I do not ask things like, how long before I become a being who is enlightened? I pretty much think that's never going to happen. But rather, I focus on living every moment of the meditation or of the rest of my life intentionally. I'm aware of what I'm doing every moment. If I exit a room, the door does not slam behind me. Actually, you may have heard me slam that door, but I'm not perfect. I endeavor to hold the doorknob and close the door with deliberateness, a intention, a quiet awareness. And more, during that first meditation retreat and after, I became more intentional about the meditation, about the teaching that was happening. And I began to feel that it wasn't just physical and hard work and doing dishes and things like that. It was actually a spiritual experience. So I had gone from attention to intention, and I attained more spirituality. All that bowing and chanting and burning incense and wearing robes, they were ways to catch attention. And from then, the intentionality to have spiritual experiences and maintain them. And thinking about that further, recently, I was reading a poem about attention by Mary Oliver, titled, "The Real Prayers Are Not the Words, but the Attention That Comes First." I don't know if you've read this poem, but in it she describes a little hawk going high up, riding the wind, perfectly relaxed and calm. And then there is a tensing, a circling as the hawk gets ready, makes its dive and lands on the grass, perhaps to grasp a tasty morsel that was there. And in the comments about this poem that I read online, there's one by Brianna Curran who comments on this poem in her blog, and she has a blog on intentionality and how it illustrates attention and intention. And she writes, and this is a quote, "In preparation for giving thanks, sharing grace, offering a kind thought, or begging the universe for mercy, the mind settles. We may prepare for this moment differently, but the attention that comes first is a necessary mindfulness activity to prepare the body and the mind for prayer. It is in this moment," Mary Oliver says, "before we begin to ask or to share, that we know who we truly are. For Oliver, the stillness comes as a hawk, as it slowly circles before the dive." That's the end of that quote by Brianna Curran. How then do we pray? Where is the attention and the intention of faith or the search for spirituality and our daily actions that connect with that? Are we mindful of the attention that precedes it? And now I just have to mention a film I saw recently, even though it came out several years ago. And in part, it points to the intricacies of attention and intention in relation to spiritual practice. The film is called The Two Popes. It came out in 2019. Some of you, I see, have seen that. And one of the two popes, of course, is Benedict XVI, who was elected pope in 2005 and who was a stickler for liturgy, tradition, and consistency. Many of you may remember how he was. And the other one is Pope Francis, who used to be Cardinal Bergoglio, and who favors being flexible in today's changing world. By the way, when Joseph Ratzinger was voted in as Pope, the future Pope, Francis, was the second preferred choice. How many of you knew that? Yeah. It was between the two of them. In one conversation the two have in this story in the film, Francis asks Benedict, "Is it okay to smoke while praying?" And Benedict answers, "Of course not." I mean, can you imagine me doing this here? Of course not. If you smoke while praying, you cannot get close to God, he says. says Francis, because this was a trick question. So, is it okay to pray while smoking? Now, this question Benedict had to think about for a bit. And then he says, yeah, it's always good to pray. But in both situations, the person is praying and the person is smoking, right? And we can think about similar questions about meditation, thinking about the grocery list while meditating, which I admit I have done, and anything else that we do in daily life where we would also like to know, is this really also spiritual? Like applying our principles, our values. When is anything spiritual? It depends on the intention. And spirituality, whether it's Judaic, Islamic, Catholic, Buddhist, a Unitarian Universalist, or anything else, humanism, it trains us to bring us to intention. In Buddhism, this intentional spirituality is the part that is called samadhi in the Eightfold Path, or the state of intense focus and attention to everything we do. Doing our dishes. I speak about that a lot because I don't use a dishwasher, so it's always an example that comes up in my mind. Doing dishes, walking, praying, meditating, going to school, studying, raising our children, voting, demonstrating. We can bring spirituality to any activity, and if we maintain it, then everything becomes spiritual. Depending on our religion, the main focus of our life may be generosity, or hospitality, or compassion, or interbeing, or many other things, or all of those things together. As in other religions, living our UU values every day is helped or facilitated by allowing our spirituality to train us to pay attention to ourselves and to our surroundings. Thus, when we see an injustice, we may focus our attention on it so that we may suggest or engage in an action to fight the injustice. When we're faced with evidence that some people are systematically excluded from jobs, privileges, education, immigration, we can focus our attention on that. Regularly, probably daily, each of our principles or values may induce us to pay attention to it and perhaps think about it in our actions, apply it. We can thus live our actions every day in both a spiritual and a practical, meaningful way. May it be so. Let us now rise in body or spirit and sing our final hymn. It's number 119 in the great hymnal, Once to Every Soul and Nation. We'll sing the 4 verses. So that's 119 in the great hymnal.